Hi everybody, I'm KHOU 11 meteorologist Pat Cavlin coming to you from Houston, Texas with an evening update on the latest with Hurricane Milton. It is Tuesday, October 8th, 2024. We're doing this live update just because there's so much interest in what's going on with this storm. This has been one of the most impressive, one of the most historic storms that we have seen in a very long time, in nearly 20 years. In the Atlantic basin. And of course, this is going to impact a lot of folks, a lot of friends and family that we have in Florida. And of course, if anyone from Florida is watching, this is going to be impacting you as well. Brand new update. This just came in. I have not even seen this yet. They waited to the last second to drop this update. The 7 p.m. update. The wind speed has not changed. They held it steady at 165 miles per hour, but the pressure dropped. So we went from 905 millibars to 902 millibars, a sign that this storm is still trying to intensify, as if that weren't obvious from the satellite imagery. So what we're looking at here, this is infrared satellite imagery. What infrared satellite imagery does is it tells us the temperature of the tops of the clouds. Why does that matter? Because think of hurricanes as just a giant complex of thunderstorms rotating around a core. That's what a thunderstorm, that's what a hurricane is. The colder the tops of those clouds, the higher the clouds are. The higher the clouds are, the more intense the storms are. And therefore, the more intense the storms, the more intense the hurricane. So the colder the cloud tops, the more intense the hurricane and the better organized the storm is. And you can see, I mean, this is just pretty much a perfect circle on satellite. You've got those bright white colors indicating really cold cloud tops on the order of 80 to 100 degrees below 0 Celsius. That's some of the coldest cloud top readings that we ever see with tropical systems. And it's not just a couple of patches of white. The whole thing is that color, indicating a very broad area of intense thunderstorms around the core of this storm. Movement is also starting to move to the northeast now. For a while, this storm is going just to the east, but we'll do one there, and then watch what happens. The storm is starting to take that northeast jog now. Still moving about east by northeast, but still starting to take more of that turn, which is not a good sign, obviously, for Florida, but as long as it stays in that forecast cone, then we have a better idea of what we're going to expect, right? We don't want the storm to deviate from the forecast cone. Let's take a wider look at what's going on, and we'll switch views. So we go from infrared satellite to water vapor satellite. This is a little more self-explanatory, right? Water vapor indicates the amount of moisture, the amount of water vapor that's in the atmosphere. So the green here indicating a very saturated atmosphere. That's obvious around the hurricane. The copper color, though, to the north and west indicates bone dry, I mean desert dry air that's trying to nudge its way into the northwest side of this storm. And notice this arc in the clouds here. That's the jet stream that's starting to influence what's going on here in the Gulf of Mexico. So the jet is literally dipping south and arcing across the middle of the Gulf. It's not close enough to the storm yet that it's going to have a negative impact on what the storm looks like, the health of the storm, but eventually as the storm begins to move closer to the jet stream, that's when the jet will start to work in our favor and it will start to weaken the storm. So right now the storm looks incredible on satellite, but of course the more incredible something looks, the better something looks on satellite, the more dangerous it is, the worse it is. So just a little bit of vocabulary background there as we get into this live update. If I ever say something looks amazing or it looks beautiful or whatever, it means that it's bad, basically. The better something looks, the more dangerous it is. And we have a dangerous, healthy-looking storm there on satellite. But our saving grace as we get into tomorrow will be it starting to move closer to this jet stream, this really fast river of air in the upper levels of the atmosphere. That's what's going to start to weaken it. On the flip side, as it weakens, it will start to expand, and we'll touch on that in just a second. Hurricane hunters are in this storm right now, and they did one pass. The first pass they did, they found the lowest pressure down to 902 millibars, which is why we now have that reading. They also found wind speeds at 176 miles per hour. I don't think that translated to the surface, which is why they held steady at 165. These flight level winds don't always reflect what's happening down at the surface, so they actually drop what's called dropsondes. They're just weather instruments. They drop out of the plane and they record what's going on in the atmosphere all the way down to the surface. And so obviously those did not record a wind speed higher than 165, but the pressure is down, which means that the wind speeds may follow. We may get a jump in the next update, which comes in at 10 p.m. Central Time. So the hurricane hunters just did their second pass through the eye. They'll do probably 2 more passes before they call it a night and head home before the next flight comes out later on. But a very healthy and dangerous looking storm here on satellite. Latest forecast, no changes with the 7 p.m. update. We don't get our next change until a 10 p.m. update. So if you've been following along, it all looks the same. Still expected to maintain Category 5 status through tonight. We do expect it to drop down to Cat 4 status by tomorrow afternoon, and that is a result of that wind shear now starting to chip away at the storm. That will continue right up till landfall. So we're still expecting landfall here late Wednesday night as a Category 3 hurricane. So we will go from Cat 5 to Cat 3 status. A word of caution though, if you live in Florida, if you got friends or family there, you may think, okay, weakening storm, this is great news. However, a weakening storm is an expanding storm, which means instead of a small area seeing impacts, we're going to have a larger area seeing these impacts as Milton comes on shore. Now, exactly where that landfall point is still kind of up in the air. It could be anywhere within this cone, and in some cases could even be outside of that cone. But this is what it's looking like at this point. Still from Tampa Bay now down to Fort Myers. You got to keep your guards up as this storm approaches for tomorrow night. National Hurricane Center, when they issue their forecast products, they'll actually issue a full discussion on what's going on with the storm. And it's a little science heavy, but sometimes there are messages to the public in there. And this is one that I just pulled. Evacuations and other preparations should be completed today, Tuesday. Milton has the potential to be one of the most destructive hurricanes on record for West Central Florida. The folks at the National Hurricane Center do not write this stuff for clicks. They don't write it for money. There's no clickbait involved here. They kind of give it to you straight. They give it to you exactly what they're saying. And for them to say something like this should hopefully impress upon everybody how significant this storm is and almost how unprecedented it could be to see a storm go into this part of Florida at this strength. So some really kind of sobering words there from the Hurricane Center. All right, so let's talk about Milton's interaction with the jet stream. So what we've got plotted here are the upper level winds. The darker the blue, the stronger the wind. So you can see the jet stream cuts right across the Gulf of Mexico and then shoots to the north and east. On the bottom edge of it, we've got Milton here making that approach to the Florida west coast. We will go from a Cat 5 to a Cat 3 storm because wind shear will eventually start to shred and pull away at the northern edge of this storm, again, compromising the core and eventually compromising the strength of the storm. It won't happen fast enough, though, to shred the storm to pieces. That won't happen for several days, but it will be enough, again, to bring the strength down. So like I said, even though the strength comes down, the size gets bigger. Here's the reason why. The last few days, we have seen incredible fluctuations in the strength of Milton. We saw it go from a Category 1 storm to a Cat 5 hurricane in just a matter of hours. It got down to being the second strongest hurricane on record in the Gulf, one of the top 5 strongest hurricanes ever in the Atlantic Basin, which includes the Gulf of Mexico. So some incredible statistics have come out of this storm. The reason why all of this happened so fast is in part due to its size. Milton, as big as it looks on satellite, the core of the storm is really tiny. In fact, yesterday, the eye of the storm, I think, was only about 4 miles in diameter. A 4-mile eye is one of the smallest that's ever been recorded. When you have a storm that has a really compact core, think of it like a figure skater. As they pull their arms in as they're doing a spin, they start to spin faster, right? All of that energy is brought into the center of the storm and it's allowed to operate more efficiently. That's what's happening here. As that core gets tighter, as it's a smaller core, it's able to intensify a lot faster than if it were a large storm with a big eye. So this storm so far has had a really compact core, which is why it's been able to intensify so fast. As we go through the next 24 to 36 hours and it starts to weaken, this wind field and the core of the storm is going to almost, I would say, at least double in size. Look at the size of this now. On approach, to the southwest Florida coast, to the Tampa Bay coast. By 7 p.m. tomorrow, we're talking about hurricane force winds within here, within that red, yellow, and orange color, and then tropical storm force winds. I mean, it's going to be a huge storm. We're talking about widespread impacts. And that's going to be twofold. Not only are the wind impacts now going to extend a considerable distance away from wherever the landfall point is, but when you have a bigger wind field, that leads to more storm surge. And the reason for that is just simply because you've got more wind over more area, so that's more water to pick up. The more area that you can cover with that strong wind, the more water you can pick up. And so over time, as the storm maintains that strength and expands in size, you build up that wall of water that we call storm surge. And ultimately, even as the storm weakens, that storm surge doesn't go down. It stays at that Cat 4 or Cat 5 level, and it's got to go somewhere. And it goes right into the west coast of Florida. So from southwest Florida up to Tampa Bay, the biggest risk for storm surge as this system makes landfall late Wednesday night. Here's a different view of it on Future Track. You could see tomorrow morning, we're already starting to get more of an asymmetrical shape here, right? We've got a tight core of precipitation around the eye, and then this huge precipitation field that's getting pulled away from the center. That's the influence of the jet stream. You see it even more as we fast forward this. And look at how big the eye is now. So instead of that 4-mile wide eye, we've got like a 40-mile wide eye here. It could be 10 times bigger than it was at its smallest point yesterday by the time we get to landfall. But now we've also got rain extending all the way out towards the east coast. So it becomes a very lopsided storm. And so with this, you've got two threats now. You've got freshwater rain flooding that's going to happen on the north side of the system, where you get some of those heavier rainfall values. So Tampa Bay, tremendous amounts of rainfall and a lot of wind too. You're on the north side here of that eye wall. On the south side of the storm, not a lot of rain, so we're not worried about rainfall flooding, but incredible amounts of storm surge getting pushed in by that storm. You're talking about winds coming onshore 100 miles per hour. That's pushing feet and feet and feet of water from the Gulf of Mexico into those communities. And in some of the videos that we've been doing the last few days, we've had people comment saying, I'm watching from the Carolinas, I'm watching from Georgia. Is this storm going to impact us? Does it loop around and hit us? So we're going to take Future Track out even further. We go out in time. That cold front that's coming into the Gulf of Mexico right now, it's not just going to stop in Texas and Louisiana. It goes through the whole country. And that is going to literally sweep this thing. First of all, it's going to shred it to pieces. Look at that. By Thursday night, it's a mess as it goes out to sea. But it takes it to the east, away from the U.S. The only impact that we are going to see in the United States, unfortunately, is going to be in Florida. But areas like Georgia, the Carolinas, this is not your storm. Thankfully, you've got enough to deal with. Unfortunately, though, for the folks in Florida, this is going to be your second time going through a hurricane. Different area, but still very impactful for a good part of the state. All right, let's talk storm surge now. This is the official map put out by the National Hurricane Center. They've painted the entire West Coast under the potential for seeing storm surge. This forecast is going to get much more fine-tuned as we get into tomorrow. But right now the forecast calls for 10 to 15 feet of storm surge for all of Tampa Bay. 10 to 15 feet of storm surge would be the highest value that they've ever seen in Tampa Bay. So if you have family that lives in Tampa, they're by the water, they're saying, I'm not leaving, I've been through storms before, I know how this goes. There's no other way to say this than if this verifies in the worst case scenario, Tampa's going to run out of luck. This will be the worst storm they've seen in over 100 years. That being said, there is the potential that the storm goes farther south and Tampa Bay gets lucky again. That's not a gamble you want to take, though, because it's going to be a last-minute decision, and by that point, it's too late to evacuate. Best case scenario, you get out, and you come back the next day, and your home is still there. Worst case scenario, you stay, and you end up on the roof of your home as a storm comes in with 15 feet of storm surge. Just some words of wisdom there, and if you don't believe me, ask some folks down at Fort Myers Beach that went through this 2 years ago, the folks that stayed in Fort Myers Beach, what that experience was like. A little farther down the coast, speaking of Fort Myers Beach, this is terrible because, again, just 2 years ago, they went through Hurricane Ian, wiped out a large part of Fort Myers Beach, which is its own city, separate from Fort Myers. And now we're forecasting, again, 8 to 12 feet of storm surge for that area. And that forecast may go up depending on what this track actually looks like by the time it gets tomorrow. But big time evacuations going on in Cape Coral, Fort Myers, the outer islands of Lee County, and also Port Charlotte. Port Charlotte didn't get a huge hit from storm surge with Ian. Unfortunately, it looks like this will be your storm for storm surge. And then the values do drop off as you get farther to the south. All right, let's take a look at the model plots. We start with the current satellite image, and we send all the models on their way. So each one of the white lines here indicates a different computer model. We could look at these until, you go blurry vision-wise, just looking at the computer screen. So what we've done is we simplify it. We take a cluster of these models, we average them, and we get what's known as the consensus. That's the black lines that are going through the screen. We zoom in, and remember I was talking about Tampa Bay could get lucky. There's a chance. If you've been following along with these model plots, they've been going back and forth. North, south, and a difference of only 20, 30, 40 miles. This latest run, the models are south of Tampa Bay. Tomorrow morning, the models could be north of Tampa Bay. But this is where things stand right now. The models take this storm just to the south of Tampa Bay into the Sarasota-Bradenton area, which would mean the worst storm surge comes in on the south side into southwest Florida. And you get a north wind, which means a reverse storm surge in Tampa Bay where the water actually leaves the bay. Speaking of that, let's talk about the storm surge impacts. This is the most important takeaway that I'm going to give you with this video. Someone watching this, or someone that has friends or family, someone that's in Florida is going to get unlucky. That's the bottom line. If it's not Tampa Bay, it's Southwest Florida. That's what's going to happen. We have a major storm that's coming for the west coast of Florida. Somebody's going to get unlucky. I hate to say it, but that's just the way it is. Whether or not Tampa Bay is spared will really hinge on the exact track. And the reason why we keep mentioning Tampa Bay is because, first of all, haven't taken a direct hit in over 100 years. But second of all, that bay is so large and shaped in such a way that if you get the storm making landfall like this, where it goes right through northern Pinellas County. Pinellas County is where St. Petersburg is, right here, okay? That is going to take all of this water and it is going to push it into the bay. And that bay is a bowl. It has nowhere to go. So once you fill that bowl with water, then it will start to empty into neighborhoods and communities and cities. That's the issue with Tampa Bay. And nobody that has lived there in modern history has experienced this yet because, again, it's been over 100 years since they've taken a direct hit from a storm like this. So since then, obviously this area has built up significantly. So there's a lot of folks that have never been through this, that aren't from the area, that just moved there. Just think about how much the population has increased in the last 10 years, okay? And so now you've got all this developed area, homes, communities, cities, towns, that are going to be impacted by this. That would be the worst case scenario. This is one scenario. I'm not saying that this is going to happen. This is just one scenario. The other scenario and how things look as of this evening, again, this could change by tomorrow morning because it's only a difference of a 40-mile track shift. So instead of northern Pinellas County, now landfall happens in Sarasota, Tampa Bay dodges another bullet and gets lucky. Who's unlucky now? Everywhere south of there. Venice Beach, Sarasota, Siesta Key, Charlotte Harbor, down into the Fort Myers area. These would be the areas then hardest hit as the winds come on shore and push that water inland. St. Pete and Tampa get lucky, and that's pretty much what this is luck at this point because you're talking about 40 miles of difference because with a track like this, the winds are going to be ripping out of the east. And as that happens, you're actually going to see water levels in Tampa Bay come down as the storm wraps in. And all that water then goes into areas to the south. That's what's so complicated about this forecast. So you might be saying, okay, well then why are they evacuating people if there's still this unknown? Because it takes a lot of time to evacuate hundreds of thousands of people. So they can't do it the night before, right? That's the answer. I wish that we were at the point where we could give you a forecast down to 5 miles. We're not there yet. We're not going to be there probably until 12 hours before landfall, if that. And even then, these storms still wobble. But as we get into tomorrow, it will become more clear if that southward jog is a trend or if it's just a wobble. We could wake up tomorrow morning, the models could be back to the north again, Tampa Bay back in the crosshairs. We don't know. Regardless, though, of storm surge impacts, even if the storm takes this south track, major wind damage through the Tampa Bay area. This is going to be a very impactful storm for Tampa Bay. This is going to be an extremely impactful storm for this entire area, from Tampa Bay all the way down into Southwest Florida. So this is the bottom line. The storm will expand as it weakens. A weakening storm is an expanding storm. It gets bigger as it loses its strength. You're talking about catastrophic storm surge somewhere on the west coast of Florida. That I can tell you with certainty. Exactly where that happens, we don't know yet. Could be Tampa Bay. I will tell you for sure, it is looking like it will be Charlotte Harbor, potentially into Southwest Florida as well. But I would say anywhere from Venice to Charlotte Harbor, you are looking at catastrophic storm surge regardless of this little wobble, Tampa Bay, not Tampa Bay, because it looks like this storm is going to be somewhere to your north, which puts you on the worst side of the storm. So the big question is what happens with Tampa Bay. We'll wait and see what happens with that. But widespread wind damage is likely, not just for coastal areas, for the entire stretch of the state going from the west coast along I-4 through Orlando and coming out the east coast. This storm is expected to maintain hurricane strength across the entire peninsula. So that's the bottom line. That's what we got for you. That's the latest on Hurricane Milton as it makes that approach to Florida. Expected to maintain that Category 5 strength through the overnight. Drops down to Cat 3 by tomorrow night. If you live in the area, listen to the evacuation orders. If you have friends or family there, make sure that you're in touch with them. Make sure that they're staying safe. And remember, you run from the water, you hide from the wind. If you're not being told to evacuate, don't, unless you live in a mobile or modular home. If you don't live in a sturdy structure, then find a safer place to live. But if you live away from the water, you should be fine. Just make sure that you're hunkering down and getting ready for a big windstorm. That's the latest on Milton. Thank you for watching. Stay safe, and we'll keep you updated here as the storm gets closer.